Much. All right, question number 4. We're all familiar with the concept of sustainability. Sustainability means to meet the needs of current generations without compromising the needs of future generations. Sustainability as a concept is now roughly about 26 years old. But obviously we've done a very good job in terms of focusing on how to improve the quality of our environment, how to strengthen our economy. But then when we get to issues pertaining to the social pillar of sustainability, things then start to get a little squishy. So the prevailing view of sustainability tends to focus on the environment. Question number 1 is this viewpoint too restrictive? And then the second question is really, if sustainability is to be holistic, what are the less prominent issues that need to be captured under the umbrella of sustainability?
Well, the short answer is yes, right? I think for lack of a better term, the environmental lobby has been extremely effective in co-opting sustainability. And so many people, when they think sustainability, they almost immediately think of the environment and think of things like green issues and LEED perhaps, and those kinds of things. And so they almost have become interchangeable and synonymous in nomenclature when you think about sustainability. But I think if we want to be much more broad with that definition and actually drill down more, I think about educational access. I think about economic development. If we want the communities that we're sensitive to and or many of us came from to be sustainable 20 years from now, we have to think about educational opportunities for the next generation. Many of our public school systems are miserable. You go to any major city, most of those public school systems are way below what they need to be to effectively educate our kids. If we want to think about economic access, that's something that is, we all are aware of the fact that our upper classes and our middle classes and our lower classes are drawing wider and wider apart than they were in the 80s. And that's something that's been going on for quite some time. And how do we address that? And is there a way that we can make an effective impartation to the community? Because if we're not, they're not going to be sustainable. The communities that I know I grew up in does not look anything like what it was when I grew up. And that's something that I think many of us could say about our neighborhoods. And so if we're really going to be sustainable, we have to broaden that definition dramatically outside this environment.
Okay.
Like Antoine said, I think the answer is yes, and I think that's exactly why Kim came up with the seed, because like something like LEED is specifically looking at the built environment data, but in terms of the lesser issues, and again like Antoine said, it's educational. It's how you live, how you work. For example, last year in Detroit, we had a presentation about the process of creating the city plan, where they actually did go and invest time, a whole year, to interview the people of the city, which was really important. And I think they did a good job. But the problem is that other piece, this less prominent issue that we're talking about, is the structure of the schools and the mentality of it. Like what everybody thinks of that area, and how do you change that? How do you basically make it sustainable to where people will want to come, people want to come back and grow there. So there's just a lot of issues, but it's definitely beyond just the built environment.
Okay.
And I just want to share a little bit more about why one of the issues that Steve is sort of struggling with. I think it's easy to measure environmental impacts, which is why LEED has a checklist, and there are certain things that you can do to sort of measure your impact, measure water consumption and energy consumption, all those things. So like they're numbers. It's very scientific. Social issues are a lot more difficult to measure. How do you measure how someone feels about their environment? How do you measure and I guess you can count food deserts to some extent, but it's just not as easily sort of packaged the way that environmental sustainability is. So I think and then economic is somewhere in between. I mean, you can count wealth disparity to some extent, but I think the social and economic pieces are just harder to kind of put dimensions on, whereas environmental is a little bit easier from a scientific standpoint. So I think that's something that we have to really deal with to kind of compare apples to apples from project to project.
Mm-hmm. Previously, there was a question about barriers, and it seems like you're identifying another barrier. So is there a solution? And not trying to put you on the spot, but I know that you contributed towards the development of a concept such as SEED, but also there are a lot of architects who are now working on public interest design. And so, given the fact that you are a critical thinker and you are a thought leader on this, are you aware of how people are really helping to address what is an obvious barrier?
Okay, I think that people are becoming more savvy as more time and attention is being devoted to these types of issues. And I think, it's been, maybe in the last 10 years, where people have really started to focus on public interest design as, sort of a subset of the profession. And I think as we continue to kind of study these different projects that we're working on, I think people are getting better at it, but I think we still need a lot more like sort of research and development and actual like dollars like devoted to developing a lot of these ideas and kind of figuring out how projects can be replicated and how certain processes can be replicated throughout not only the country but also the world. So we're seeing a lot more. There are firms that actually have been founded recently that focus solely on public interest design. So starting to learn those lessons, but they're still really young. So how I think part of the issue, getting over the barrier is just to kind of give it some time, but also focus more resources on trying to put metrics to a lot of the social and economic issues.
Okay, the gentleman to your left has a comment, and to the point about barriers. Many of you are probably already aware of this, but the National Urban League annually releases an equality index. And one of my observations has been, gee, it would be great, if someone were to take the equality index, which is on social economic indicators, combining with an environmental index, and then create a whole new sustainability index based on linking these two metrical systems together. It hasn't happened yet. Maybe NOMA will do it, I don't know.
Yeah, one of the things that is interesting about sustainability is that in its definition it's actually not restrictive at all, but I think in its application it's actually very restrictive. I think it sort of goes beyond the environment. And another kind of interesting point about sustainability is that its application is in balance. The principles that are like included in its application or not necessarily kind of well balanced between all the different factors to actually achieve that sustainability. And its definition, when you're looking at it, it's talking about needs of the present, but whose needs are actually trying to meet in the present. And that brings on interesting questions about where is it in the world and what kind of needs are we meeting. And another kind of things that's sort of like been in my mind about sustainability is that I think another concept that needs to be added to it is self-sufficiency. Is sustainability, is the goal of sustainability to achieve self-sufficiency? And that it's also changing based on where you are in the world, and how you do that is also very different. I think restricting it to the environment, it's kind of limiting its impact, its capacity to actually achieve what it's actually meant to achieve, which is actually meeting the needs of the present and also without compromising the need of the future.
Question, have we greenwashed sustainability? Okay. That's a rhetorical question. You can blink if you agree. Any other observations that people want to offer in terms of question number 4? Let me offer this one because we are talking about whether or not the concept of sustainability is it too restrictive and what are the other things that need to be part of the umbrella. What about the humanities? Because we often think about sustainability in terms of the environment and the economy, but the story of who we are collectively as a people needs to be sustained. To the credit of minority architects, many of you are familiar with the firm Lee, which is based in Boston. Lee worked on the master plan for the 18th and Vine Jazz District in Kansas City, Missouri in 1989. And that project is a $70 million success story. And what's important about it is that it's not just a story of historic preservation, but it's a story of heritage preservation. So I think as we look at issues of sustainability, we also have to be mindful that concepts like the humanities also fall under that umbrella as well. Catherine, do you have an observation? You ready?
Yes, I do. Just leading off of your comment, Carlton, I was just jotting down, this is something that comes to mind often these days, with LEAD and the bean counting that goes on with LEAD and those other programs, and then we have our friend Reddit, that showed up. And what I've noticed is that we architects, we are so much into these digital, things that we don't talk about the social aspects of design anymore. We hardly even talk about design, pure design, but the social impact of what we're doing. What is that space that we're designing? How is it going to function? Not just can we get 15 defibrillators or whatever in the room, but how is it going to function? How is it going to be good for the people that either live there, work there, or are cared for in that space? And I'm not sure how our education system is set up. I know when I was going through school, you had to take courses in sociology, anthropology, psychology, and I'm not sure that still happens because of some of the NAB requirements. But I think that we need to have a re-emphasis on the social sciences in design and an active emphasis, because what we do in our daily lives is so far removed from people. I mean, we design buildings, but do we really design them for people? Are we designing them for the clients, who have the money, and they're trying to make money off of the buildings that we design, most of them. But we also need to look at designing those spaces for the people that actually are using them.